Hey guys, okay, so today you're going to be watching D-Day, Things You Don't Forget by Memoirs of World War II, number 14. I'm hoping I don't tear up in this one like I almost did in the last one. But we'll see. It depends on the story. I know one of the memoir videos is a Holocaust survivor. When we get to that video, I'm probably gonna. Anyways, woo. Just gonna watch this one. Let's go. I don't know why I'm being so weird.
When we hit the beach, we knew there was no doubt in our mind that we had to take that beach. Things like we went through are just things you don't forget. I mean, it's impossible.
Korea and World War II? Fuck that. No.
Well, when the war broke out, I was still in high school. I was 16 years old. I didn't think the war would last 6 months, really, when I first heard about it. 2 years later.
Wait, what? Why wouldn't he think it'd last that long? Did he just think the numbers were so much against the Axis that the war would be over fast? Or no?
I had graduated from high school.
I've honestly never heard someone, say that the war will be over that quick. Well, except for when it comes to World War I. World War I, everyone's like, we'll be home by Christmas, right?
And went to aircraft school to take the same schooling that the Army Air Corps men did. And I went down there trying to get in.
Fun fact, the U.S. Air Force, I believe, was originally a part of the Army, right? It was originally a segment of the Army, and then it became its own branch after World War, I think.
The Air Force.
It was either a part of the Army or as a branch of the U.S. Navy, and then after World War II, it became its own separate Army military branch in the U.S. government.
And I was drafted in the Army.
Although he had his sights set on the skies, Harold McMurrin was sent to the United States Army with the 546th Maintenance Company. The closest he would come to an airplane would be as a repairman for a height finder, an instrument used to determine the altitude of enemy aircraft.
Yo, I've never seen that fucking thing before. That thing's crazy looking. Looks like a big ass telescope. Which actually it probably just is. Probably just a big telescope and probably partially a computer. If it's to just figure out the latitude of a enemy aircraft. I don't know. I'm not good at technology.
But to where Harold would be deployed was still a mystery.
The day before you ship out, if you got ODs, you're going to the Atlantic side. If you got khakis, you're going to the Pacific side. They didn't have to tell you. When you went through there and they started issuing those clothing, you knew where you was going.
Dang. I've never heard that described. Huh. But yeah, that makes sense. Because obviously, in war, depending on where you go, you have to wear a different uniform, right? Because of the different climate conditions, etc., or whatever that are found in that region you are fighting. But I've never. That's interesting to hear. Never heard someone really say like, we knew where we were going once we were just issued our clothes. I don't think that'd be the way today. Would it? Because obviously the clothing that soldiers wear in the Middle East are more tan colored. I don't know. I'm not a military person.
And we didn't want to go to the Pacific, so we lucked out in that respect. going to the European theater.
It's crazy though. Like, if we look at the numbers, the Germans caused more casualties to American soldiers than the Japanese did. But for American soldiers fighting the Japanese, that was something that they didn't want to do. That was kind of like, the joke, the meme of German soldier getting sent to the Eastern Front, right? Even though, well, obviously for the German side, the Russians are who caused the greatest casualties to the Germans. Well, the Germans caused the greatest casualty to Americans, and it wasn't the Japanese. The Pacific Theater had, I guess, based on what people have said and how they did not want to get sent to the Pacific Theater, is the Pacific Theater had the most horrifying experiences. I think I
Harold
explained
may
that
have counted
fine.
himself lucky, but before he would ever set foot in war-torn Europe, the war would find him.
So,
We were sent down to the English coast. That was one of the worst places that you could be because the Germans had Air Force bases just across the channel, and they would bomb us just about every night. And we had foxholes to get in, but if one of those 500-pound bombs dropped within 100 yards of you, it'd bounce you out of that hole just like you had springs in your shoes. And you crawl back in another one, hit close, do the same thing.
But the nightly bombings were only a glimpse of what was to come. Soon, Harold would find himself advancing, straight into the jaws of death. Since late 1940, the Allied forces had been chipping away at Adolf Hitler's global conquest, finally achieving victory in northern Africa and a successful invasion of Italy. But the Allies knew that the French coast was the gateway to victory in Europe, and in June of 1944, they were finally ready to take it.
Oh, well, I don't know if I should even say it, but I know someone will probably comment it. Since I'm bringing notice to it now, especially. Gateway to Europe. More obviously, I think we can all say safely that the Russians were pushing through at this point. They were like near the borders of Poland at this point. So, gateway to Europe, more like the Allies needed to start taking land from the Germans themselves, so that the Soviets didn't just dominate Europe, didn't just dominate the peace treaty, right? That is not to undermine any of the sacrifices that the Allies made, right? It's just a little. Just gonna say it before someone comments it. Someone usually always does.
Operation Overlord would be the largest seaborne invasion in history, landing over 150,000 troops with intent to drive Hitler's armies back from where they came.
And what's interesting about this, when we think about it, the beaches that they landed at, small. 150,000 people storming 4 or 5 beaches. Omaha, Juneau, Sword, Utah. I think there was a 5th one, I can't remember its name. 4 or 5. But small, technically a small amount of land, to land that many people. It essentially had an overwhelming naval superiority as well as an overwhelming amount of Air Force power doing bombings and runs, right? Before the invasion started. And even with that amount of people, it still had a high risk of failure. Like, that's just to picture all those, the amount of gunpowder, the amount of ships, the amount of planes, and the amount of people that were sent to land on just 4 or 5 different beachheads. And then in comparison to the amount of people that, like, the Germans had left. Now, obviously, the Germans had fortifications, so it made it easier for them to defend. But still, when you look at the amount of firepower that the Allies brought, but still there was a fear that there was a good chance of it failing. Even though they had roughly the element of surprise, they had the paratroopers disrupting the beach defenses from behind enemy lines. They had the bombing runs. They had the naval bombardments. Still, a good chance of failure. That to me is just insane. I can't really explain more than that. Just, I think it's insane. I don't know. It'd just be me.
Germany knew the invasion was coming. The only question was where.
Yep.
Hitler was determined that we were going to invade up at Calais. And he kept his two...
I mean, it's a fair assumption for it to be Calais. I've said it before. That's the closest point of Europe to England. So that would be the fastest way you can get there, right? You could support your bomb. You could have more planes flying over at like higher rates or whatever. But yeah, that would have been the obvious choice, right?
SS divisions up there, even when his generals told him that we was coming in on the beach, he said, that's just a decoy down there.
Yeah, there was, I think also one of his generals that was in charge of the defense there kind of agreed with that idea. I remember. I think it was Rommel, though, that's kind of... I could be getting this wrong. I don't want to get it wrong, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it was Rommel that wanted the tanks closer beaches, or well, put in a position to where that they could respond to either Normandy or Calais. But then I think one of the other generals was like, keep them closer to Calais or something, or further inland to where they would be they'd be useless to the defenses. Can't remember.
But the real decoy was just off the coast of Calais, where the
Oh,
Allies
yeah, the
amassed a
DKR.
false army under the supposed leadership of General George
Decoy army.
Patton to draw Hitler's attention away from the beaches of Normandy.
Up on Calais on the English side, they were putting tanks made of rubber, blow them up, trucks and everything up there, just stacking them in there.
The deception had worked, and the defending German forces were split. In the early morning of June 6th, the invasion was underway.
We loaded on the LST, and we started to move out.
But it seemed like anything that could go wrong did go wrong. The Navy bombardment and Allied bombers missed crucial German targets, leaving the enemy defenses largely intact.
Hard to be truly accurate with the technology of the day, as well as thousands of feet up in the air, so yeah.
American tanks sank beneath the waves before they could reach the shore, and the airborne paratroopers deployed behind enemy lines were left scattered and disoriented by adverse weather and enemy firepower.
The 101st and 82nd Airborne Division, they dropped before daylight, and that was a disaster. I went in at 7 a.m. The bodies were drowned and been killed while they were still in the water. We went in way, way too early because they had not taken as much of the beach as they thought they would. So when we got there, we actually became infantry. We were not maintenance, we was infantry.
With the battle still raging when he reached the shore, Harold was forced to abandon his equipment and join in the fight.
The Germans had just about every inch of that beach covered with machine gun fire. You could see it, the bullets hitting all around you in the sand just popping up all around you.
God, that'd be terrifying. Hey, ugh.
There was very few of us that made it through without getting hit. No further from me to you. You just see him just blood and guts everywhere, hit with a machine gun, 50 caliber machine gun. And you'd be splattered with his blood. And no way to really clean it up from you. And you're wondering, trying to find out where that fire came from, and maybe you could return some fire. But they were firing from so many different directions. You never knew which one actually hit you, buddy. You just was praying you wasn't the next one that they hit. Hear them hollering, begging for help from the guys that was wounded, and some that was wounded trying to get up under a sand dune that was there. That was the best protection that was there at that time. But it's hard to describe your feelings when you see something like that.
When veterans like that, their voices crack like that, that just gets me.
And the people that got less credit for what they did was the medics. They did not have very much training either, but they did a good job. You could holler for a medic, and the chances are there'd be one there in just about 5 minutes or less, because they knew that holler.
I've never thought about that before. The training of the medics. That they would have. Wow. They would have. Thinking on it now that he said it, I'm realizing that they would not have been trained. They would not have had extensive training. They would have had fairly basic medical training because they needed to get people onto those beaches. They needed men. So they were drafted, volunteers. Obviously, there was a high amount of volunteerism through the United States and Britain for World War II, but they still would not have received, a good amount of them would not have received the training probably necessary for this war, or at least for this beach invasion.
In spite of tremendous casualties, failed plans, and fierce German resistance, the battered Allied soldiers reorganized, improvised, and persevered until their objectives were completed and the beaches were taken. D-Day may have looked vastly different than expected, but the gates were now open, and victory seemed just over the horizon.
When we hit the beach, we knew, there was no doubt in our mind, that we had to take that beach. Because if we didn't, everybody would be a loser. But we would sacrifice everything we had to take that beach. And I think that's the reason we got it.
Hey everyone.
Yeah. Channel's so good. I was looking in the comments before I started recording, and the top comment said something very, very important. I think it needs to be. We are the last generation that will have these World War II veterans around. We're the last generation possible. We are the last generation to be able to record their stories and their memories, their experiences, and their feelings of the war. I think what would aid future generations, educating them on the Second World War, is the memories and stories of those that fought in it, and not the textbook stories of these battles were fought here, this nation lost this many people, because then that just brings it to statistics. These personal stories are, honestly, in my opinion, more important than the numbers and all that, because it's about the individual to me. So, I don't know how many of you probably have watched to this far, but you know a World War II veteran, either in your family, friend group, something in your neighborhood, and they haven't had their story told. See, you can get them to tell their story. Very important for generations. I don't think I have anything else to add. So, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thank you.